At least 300 developers.
But at this point, it seems like we really need more to develop it.
Let's just calm down and talk about this.
No, there's no time for that!
The game is massive.
Sure. You think you need that many to make a game?
Just asking. Now I want more than 300. I didn't know it would be this big. This is about open world exploration and space, dummy. But it doesn't even have multiplayer. This is Starfield! Alright guys, welcome back to NASA Punk. Today I want to talk about an interesting article that I read from VG 24/7. The headline reads, Starfield team is over twice the size of Fallout 76's, says ex-Bethesda dev. So how many devs are there working on Starfield? Not 300, not 400, you guessed it. Over 500 developers are working on Starfield currently. In a recent interview with PC Gamer, a dude named Nate Perkypile has been a developer for 17 years and apparently worked at Bethesda for 14 of those years, mainly working on the Fallout series. Nate is actually the founder of a developer called Just Perky Games, and he had some interesting insights about his work with Bethesda on Starfield, mainly citing the sheer size of the team behind Starfield's development as his reason for leaving BGS and forming his own game studio. When asked just how big Starfield actually is, Nate said, Starfield is a much bigger project. It's like 500 people or something on the team, whereas I think Fallout 76 was maybe 200 tops. Now, he did mention that merely a fraction of those developers are actually working on the planets in the game, which may be cause for concern to some, or it may be that what they're doing with these planets is achievable with the smaller dedicated team they have on it. If anything, it just tells us how much they're pouring into at least the main storyline and its various quests and locales. Also, about the devs working on Starfield's planets, Nate said, the map of 76 is like almost 2 times the size of Skyrim or so, and that was a lot of work for people to do, but yeah, it doesn't scale. Even if you wanted to hire outsourcing, you'd have to hire like a country. So obviously Bethesda really has their work cut out for them when it comes to building a universe as expansive as Starfield's. At this point, it's becoming more apparent why the game was delayed to 2023. I don't doubt that Bethesda, being under the umbrella of Microsoft now, has all the resources and studio hands on deck, but you can have all the money and resources in the world when it comes to developing a game, but will you give yourself enough time to realize the vision you set out to achieve? Now, going back to the size of the Bethesda dev team working on Starfield, having roughly 500 developers isn't exactly extraordinary for a modern AAA release. For comparison, CD Projekt Red's Cyberpunk 2077 had roughly 500 developers working on it as well. Don't worry, that doesn't mean what happened to Cyberpunk is going to happen to Starfield, necessarily, I hope. Nothing wrong with a little healthy skepticism, right? Anyway, there are other major developers such as Activision Blizzard who have thousands of employees working between multiple studios globally on many of their games. But that's not to say that the majority are actively developing the games, whereas it takes much more than just the computer programmers and developers to create a game. That being said, according to reports that surfaced after its launch, the actual ground floor development of Cyberpunk didn't start until around 2016, despite statements that it had been in development for roughly 9 years. That puts the development of the final build of Cyberpunk at about 4 years, which explains the problems it had at launch and why it's now slowly becoming a much better game, in my opinion, since it needed at least 3 more years of development to come close to the original vision for the game. Not only that, but you have to understand that the COVID pandemic did have a significant impact on a lot of games being developed throughout this time, and made it much harder for developers to unify their efforts, with many developers working from home and adhering to strict health and safety guidelines while trying to culminate their efforts into a finished product. For those of you who don't give two eddies about Cyberpunk, I get it, but there's a point relevant to Starfield here. According to Todd Howard, Starfield has been in development for, quote, 25 years, but this is likely an exaggeration based on the fact that Todd has wanted to make a game like Starfield as far back as the late 90s, but it seemed to be much more idealizing and concepting than pre-production or, of course, actual development. In all actuality, Starfield has really been in development since around the time of Fallout 4's release in 2015. By the time Starfield releases, God willing it's not delayed again, it will have seen roughly 7 years in development with around 500 devs, compared to Cyberpunk's alleged 4-year development cycle with the same amount of devs. Also keep in mind that the amount of people developing a game starts to fall off as a game gets closer to release. But imagine what CDPR could have done with Cyberpunk 2077, given double the time they spent actually developing the game. That, according to reports, is essentially what Starfield is doing. Unless some controversial article written by a game journalist like Jason Schreier surfaces after the release of Starfield, informing us that Bethesda scrapped Starfield in 2019 and started all over again, Starfield should be on track to release as intended after a full 7 years in development. Alright you guys, that's all I have for you in this one, but I want to know your thoughts on the matter. Do you think Starfield will be a complete and finished product come next year? Or will it suffer from unrealistic deadlines, unforeseen technical issues, and be plagued with bugs and glitches? I gotta say, I can deal with a few bugs and issues at launch, because that's pretty much expected for a new game release nowadays, but the question is, will they be minor or major? Hopefully not the latter. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting this channel. Please don't forget to subscribe so you can stay updated on the latest Starfield news and content, and make sure you click that little bell icon so you're notified of any new releases from this channel. Thanks again, and stay tuned for the next video as we look forward to the future.